What if your stepmother lured you to her glittering birthday bash, only to brand you a thief who stole her daughter's future? Picture the chandelier-lit hall erupting as Lila Grayson's world shatters, a knife at her throat hours later hinting at a darker revenge. Was she a villain snatching an inheritance, or a daughter fighting for her father's broken legacy? Subscribe now to unravel the truth with us. Help Outlaw Alley hit our first 1,000 subs and dive into the drama. The rain streaked down the tinted windows of the Emerald Crest Hotel as I stepped into its gilded lobby, my violin case slung over one shoulder and a crumpled letter clutched in my hand. My name's Lila Grayson, a 29-year-old violinist who'd spent the last decade chasing concert halls across the country until my father's death dragged me back to Seattle and thrust me into the helm of Grayson Shipping. Tonight wasn't about music, though. It was about mending a fracture that'd been splintering my family for a year. Margaret Hensley, my stepmother, had invited me to her 50th birthday soiree, her gilt-edged card promising a chance to bury the hatchets. I should have known better. The banquet hall glittered like a jewel box, golden candelabras casting a warm glow over Seattle's elite shipping magnates, tech moguls, and old money families sipping champagne under a vaulted ceiling painted with clouds. I smoothed my black dress, feeling the weight of Thomas Grayson's last words in my pocket. "You're my hope, Lila. Don't let me down." He'd written that letter a week before cancer stole him, an apology for the years I'd spent on tour instead of by his bedside. Guilt gnawed at me, sharp as a bowstring snapping mid-performance, but I'd come here to honor him, to prove I could bridge the gap he'd left behind. "Lila!" The voice ripped through the hum of polite chatter like a thunderclap, and the room froze. Margaret stood at the center of the hall, her silver gown shimmering as she pointed a trembling finger at me. "You stole my son's life," she roared, her words echoing off the marble walls. My heart slammed against my ribs, a jagged pulse drowning out the gasps rippling through the crowd. The wine glass in my hand slipped, shattering on the floor, and I flinched as a shard sliced my palm. Blood dripped onto the white marble, stark against the elegance around me. Every head turned, eyes boring into me like I was a thief caught red-handed. Margaret stalked forward, her heels clicking with menace. "You manipulated Thomas when he was dying, tricked him into handing you Grayson Shipping. That company was Elliot's birthright, his future, and you took it." Her voice cracked on her son's name, and for a split second I saw grief flicker beneath her rage. Elliot, her only child, my stepbrother, had died 3 years ago, a shadow I'd never fully understood. I'd been on tour in Boston when it happened, and the details were a blur. A shipping accident, a tragedy Thomas never spoke of. "That's not true," I stammered, my voice small against the tide of whispers swelling around me. "Dad chose me because—" She cut me off, her face twisting into a sneer. "Because you swooped in like a vulture when he was weak. You weren't even there for him, Lila, too busy playing your precious violin while I nursed him." The accusation hit like a slap, and tears stung my eyes. She wasn't wrong. I'd missed too much, lost in my music while cancer ate him alive. But the will had been clear. Thomas wanted me to lead, not her, not Elliot's memory. The crowd shifted, murmurs turning to judgment. "Always thought it was odd," a man in a tailored suit muttered, loud enough for me to hear. "She shows up out of nowhere when Thomas gets sick," a woman added, her pearls glinting as she nodded. I scanned the sea of faces. Partners I'd worked with, clients I'd fought to keep after taking over Grayson Shipping, and saw respect curdle into suspicion. My chest tightened, the air thick with expensive perfume and betrayal. Margaret's lips curled into a triumphant smirk. "You don't belong here, Lila. You're an outsider, a fraud. Give it back." Her demand hung in the air, heavy as a guillotine. I opened my mouth to fight back, but my phone buzzed in my pocket, a sharp jolt against the chaos. I glanced down, blood smearing the screen as I unlocked it. A text from an unknown number. "Leave now or die tonight." My breath caught, the words a cold blade against my spine. Was this her doing? A threat to scare me off? Or something worse? "Lila Grayson doesn't deserve Grayson Shipping," someone jeered from a nearby table, and a low boo rippled through the room. Margaret crossed her arms, her victory assured. "Get out," she said, her voice calm now, dripping with venom. No one wants a thief at my celebration. My legs trembled as I backed toward the door, the crowd parting like I was contagious. Humiliation burned through me, hotter than the blood trickling down my wrist. I'd come here to heal, to honor my father, but she'd turned me into a pariah. I stumbled into the rain-soaked night, the hotel's neon sign casting a sickly glow over the parking lot. My hand throbbed, the cut a cruel echo of the wound Margaret had torn open inside. I'd lost my mother at 10, my father at 28, and now, standing in the wreckage of this ambush, I felt like I'd lost everything else. The elite of Seattle, people I'd spent a year proving myself to, had swallowed her lies whole. But as I clutched the letter in my pocket, my father's shaky handwriting pressed against my skin, something hardened in me. I wouldn't let this stand. Not tonight, not ever. Margaret thought she'd broken me, but she didn't know the half of it. I remembered Dad's voice in that hospital room, weak but fierce. "You're stronger than you know, Lila. Protect what's ours." She'd declared war in front of everyone. Fine, I'd fight back with everything I had. As I slid into my car, rain hammering the roof, my phone buzzed again. Another text. "You can't run from the truth." I stared at it, my blood-streaked hand shaking, and whispered to the empty dark, "Neither can you, Margaret." The rain battered my windshield as I sat in the parking lot of the Emerald Crest Hotel, the engine humming beneath my trembling hands. My palms stung, the cut from the shattered wine glass wrapped hastily in a napkin I'd grabbed from the glove box. Blood had seeped through, staining the edges red, a grim mirror to the humiliation still burning in my chest. "You stole my son's life," and the crowd's boos replayed like a sour note I couldn't unhear. I'd spent a year steering Grayson shipping through choppy waters, proving I wasn't just Thomas Grayson's wandering daughter. But in one night, she'd undone it all. My phone lit up on the passenger seat, buzzing with notifications. I unlocked it, wincing as the screen's glow hit my eyes. Twitter was ablaze. "Thief of Grayson" trending across Seattle's business circles. "Lila Grayson's a fraud," one tweet read, posted by a supplier I'd met last month. "Always knew she didn't belong," another chimed in. This one from a woman I'd pitched a contract to just days ago. My stomach twisted as the vitriol piled up. Each message a brick in the wall Margaret was building to bury me. Then, a new text flashed across the screen, the unknown number glaring like a threat. "You'll pay with your life." My breath hitched, the words sinking in colder than the rain outside. Was this her plan all along? Not just to disgrace me, but to destroy me? I fumbled with the phone, my bloody fingers smearing the glass as I scrolled back to the first message. "Leave now or die tonight." The timestamp matched the moment Margaret had screamed at me. Too close to be coincidence. My eyes darted to the rearview mirror, scanning the shadowed lot. Headlights flared in the distance, then vanished behind a row of cars. I was alone, but I didn't feel it. Someone was watching. I pulled the letter from my pocket, the paper soft and worn from months of carrying it like a talisman. Dad's handwriting blurred as tears welled up. "You're my hope, Lila. Don't let me down." I'd failed him tonight, letting Margaret paint me as a thief while I stood there mute and shaking. But the memory of his voice cut through the fog. Raspy, fading, but fierce in that hospital room a year ago. "You're stronger than you know," he'd said, his hand squeezing mine as machines beeped around us. "Protect what's ours." I wiped my eyes, the napkin leaving a streak of blood on my cheek. He'd believed in me. "I wouldn't let her erase that." The car jolted as something, or someone, slammed against the driver's side door. I yelped, dropping the letter as a shadow loomed outside the window. Before I could react, the door yanked open, rain pouring in, and a gloved hand seized my arm. "Margaret sends her regards," a gravelly voice snarled, and cold steel pressed against my throat. A knife, its edge biting into my skin. Panic surged, my pulse a deafening roar. I thrashed, kicking at the dashboard, but the grip tightened, dragging me half out of the seat. The blade nicked me, a thin line of warmth trickling down my neck. "Help!" I screamed, my voice raw, lost in the storm. The attacker grunted, raising the knife higher, but headlights sliced through the dark, a security truck rounding the corner. He froze, then shoved me back into the car, bolting into the shadows as tires screeched closer. I slammed the door shut, locking it with shaking hands, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The guard's flashlight swept the lot, but the figure was gone. "You okay, miss?" The guard called, rapping on the window. I nodded, too stunned to speak, my neck stinging where the knife had grazed me. I drove off, the hotel shrinking in my rearview mirror, but the fear clung like damp clothes. Margaret wasn't just playing dirty. She was playing for keeps. My phone rang. Henry Caldwell's name flashing on the screen. Dad's lawyer, his executor, the one man I could still trust. I answered, my voice cracking. "Henry, someone just tried to kill me." There was a pause, then his steady baritone cut through. "Where are you, Lila? Get to my office now." The drive downtown was a blur, rain-slick streets reflecting the city's neon pulse. Henry's office tower loomed ahead, a beacon of glass and steel, and I parked crookedly, clutching my violin case like a shield. He buzzed me in, his gray hair disheveled as he met me at the door. "Jesus, Lila, you're bleeding," he said, ushering me inside. I sank into a leather chair, recounting the night, the ambush, the texts, the attack. Henry's jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing. This is beyond Margaret's usual games. She hired a PI to tail you after Thomas got sick. I didn't think she'd go this far. He handed me a tissue and I pressed it to my neck, the sting grounding me. "She said I stole Elliot's life," I whispered. "What does that even mean?" Henry hesitated, then pulled a photo from a drawer. Dad and a teenage boy, maybe 16, standing on a Grayson shipping dock. The boy's face was sharp, familiar, with Margaret's green eyes. "Elliot," Henry said. 3 years ago, he died in an accident tied to the company. Thomas never told you the whole story." My heart sank, a new weight settling in. "What story?" I asked, but Henry shook his head. "Not tonight. You're not safe, Lila. We need proof to fight back." I dug through my bag, finding the photo I'd discovered earlier. Dad and that same boy, Elliot, with "Forgive me" scrawled on the back. "This was in my car," I said, handing it to Henry. His face paled. "Thomas kept secrets, Lila. If Margaret's after blood, it's not just about the company." I stared at him, the knife's edge still fresh in my mind. "Then what is it about?" Henry met my gaze, his voice low. "Revenge." I leaned back, the room spinning. Margaret wanted me gone, maybe dead, and the crowd believed her lies. But Dad's letter burned in my pocket, his words a lifeline. "If I don't fight this, Henry, she wins, and Dad loses everything he built." Henry nodded, pulling a laptop from his desk. "Then we start now. Whatever she's hiding, we'll find it." I took a shaky breath, the cut on my neck pulsing. Good. Because if she wants war, I'm not running anymore. The hum of Henry Caldwell's office was a stark contrast to the chaos I'd fled. The rain, a muted drumbeat against the high-rise windows overlooking Seattle's skyline. I sat hunched in his leather chair, the tissue pressed to my neck now stiff with dried blood. My violin case rested against my leg, a silent anchor as Henry paced, his laptop casting a pale glow across stacks of files. "Elliot didn't just die. He was sacrificed," he said, his voice low and heavy, sliding a manila folder across the desk. Its edges were worn, stained with faint rust-colored smudges. Blood, maybe, or time? My stomach churned as I opened it. Inside were grainy photos of a Grayson shipping freighter, its hull scorched black, docked under a gray dawn. Newspaper clippings followed. Explosion rocks Puget Sound, 4 dead. The date, 3 years ago. Hit me like a punch. I'd been in Boston mid-tour when Dad called, his voice tight. "There's been an accident, Lila. Don't worry, just play." I hadn't pressed him, too caught up in my own world. Now a report stared back at me, typed in cold legalese. "Hazardous chemical shipment, unauthorized. Elliot Hensley, 19, among casualties." My stepbrother's name blurred as tears welled up. "What is this, Henry?" I whispered, my throat raw. He sank into his chair, rubbing his temples. 5 years ago, Thomas took a deal he shouldn't have. A client, shady, off the book, paid big to move unlisted cargo, chemicals, volatile stuff. He thought it'd save the company after a bad quarter. Henry tapped a USB drive on the desk. 3 years ago, that shipment went up in flames. Elliot was on the crew. Margaret insisted he learn the ropes. The blast killed him and 3 others. Thomas buried it, paid off investigators, kept it out of court. But he never forgave himself. I stared at the drive, a tiny black square holding my father's shame. Why didn't he tell me? My voice broke, memories flooding back. Dad at my recitals, beaming as I played Vivaldi, his hands calloused from years on the docks. Henry slid the drive into his laptop, and the screen flickered to life. Thomas appeared, gaunt and hollow-eyed, sitting in his study. "This is Thomas Grayson," he rasped, the date stamp reading 6 months before his death. "I'm recording this for Lila with Henry Caldwell and Dr. Ellen Pierce present to certify I'm of sound mind." The camera panned to Henry and a woman in a white coat, then back to Dad. "I screwed up, Lila. That explosion, I caused it. Elliot's gone because of me. But if this comes out, Grayson shipping's done. Hundreds lose their jobs. I'm leaving it to you because you'll find a way to fix it." The video cut to static, and I pressed a hand to my mouth, sobs shaking me. Henry paused it, his eyes soft. He recorded that after Margaret threatened to sue. She knew the truth. Wanted to use it to ruin him. When he gave you the company instead, she turned on you. I wiped my face, the cut on my neck throbbing. She said I stole his life. She thinks I knew. Henry nodded. "She's convinced Thomas told you everything, that you're covering for him. Tonight wasn't just about the company, it's personal." My phone buzzed, shattering the silence. An email from an unknown address. "Liar's daughter gets what she deserves." Attached was a photo of me leaving the hotel, rain-soaked and bloody, time-stamped an hour ago. "She's watching me," I said, shoving the phone at Henry, his jaw clenched. "She hacked your account, or paid someone to. This is escalating." Before I could respond, another buzz, a text this time. "Meet me at Pier 46, midnight. I survived the blast. Margaret can't silence me." My pulse spiked. A survivor? Someone who could prove Dad's story? Or hers? "We've got to go," I said, standing despite the ache in my bones. Henry grabbed his coat. "Lila, this could be a trap." I met his gaze, Dad's voice echoing in my head. "Or it's the truth. I need to know." The drive to Pier 46 was tense, the city's lights smearing into streaks through the rain. We parked near the water, the air thick with salt and diesel. A figure waited under a rusted lamppost. A man, late 20s, scarred across one cheek. "You, Lila Grayson?" he asked, voice rough. I nodded, clutching my violin case like a shield. "Name's Jake Ruiz. I was on that ship with Elliot. Margaret paid to shut me up, then tried to kill me when I wouldn't." He pulled a recorder from his pocket, hitting play. Margaret's voice crackled through. "Make sure no one talks or I'll bury you too." My blood ran cold. "She knew about the shipment?" I asked. Jake nodded. "She pushed Thomas to take the deal, wanted the money for Elliot's college. When it went wrong, she blamed him." I staggered back, the pier swaying under me. Dad wasn't the only guilty one. Margaret had blood on her hands, too. "Why tell me now?" I demanded. Jake's eyes darkened. "Saw her on TV tonight, trashing you. Figured you deserved the real story." Henry stepped forward, pocketing the recorder. "This changes everything, Lila, but you've got a choice. Keep this quiet, save the company, or expose it all and risk losing what Thomas built." I stared at the water, black and endless. Dad's confession warring with Jake's tape in my mind. If I stayed silent, I'd protect hundreds of jobs, but live with his lie? If I spoke, I'd clear his name, maybe mine, but Grayson Shipping could sink. "What would you do, Henry?" I asked, voice barely audible. He sighed. "Thomas wanted you to fix it. How's up to you?" My phone lit up again. Another email. This time, a live feed link. I clicked it, and Margaret's face filled the screen, broadcast from the hotel. Lila Grayson's running because she's guilty, she sneered, the crowd cheering. She can't hide forever, rage flared in me, drowning the doubt. She's wrong, I said, turning to Henry and Jake. I'm not running. We've got proof. Dad's tape, yours, everything. I'm going back to that party. Henry's eyes widened. Lila, shh! I cut him off, clutching the violin case tighter. She started this war. I'm ending it. The rain had slowed to a drizzle as Henry's SUV rolled back into the Emerald Crest Hotel's valet lane, the neon sign casting a fractured glow over the wet asphalt. My heart hammered against my ribs, the violin case in my lap a lifeline as I gripped the USB drive and Jake's recorder, weapons forged from truth. Jake Ruiz sat in the back seat, his scarred face set in grim determination, while Henry's hands tightened on the wheel. You sure about this, Lila? He asked, voice low. I nodded, the cut on my neck pulsing with every breath. She wanted a public fight. She's getting one. We stepped out, the doorman's eyes widening as he recognized me, the disgraced heiress returning from the rain. Henry's coat flapped in the wind as he carried a stack of files, Jake trailing behind with a quiet intensity. The banquet hall doors loomed ahead, laughter and clinking glasses spilling out like nothing had changed. But everything had. I pushed through, the crowd's chatter dying as heads turned, a ripple of shock spreading across the room. Margaret stood near a towering cake, mid-test, her silver gown gleaming under the candelabras. Her champagne flute froze mid-air when she saw me, her smirk vanishing. Lila Grayson, she spat, recovering fast. Back to beg forgiveness? The crowd tittered, phones lifting to record. I stepped onto the small stage where a jazz trio had paused, their instruments silent. You called me a thief, Margaret, I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my legs. Said I stole Elliot's life. Now hear the man you betrayed. Henry plugged the USB into a projector and Dad's face flickered onto a screen behind me. Gaunt, resolute, a ghost commanding the room. Gasps echoed as Thomas Grayson spoke. I'm Thomas Grayson. I caused the explosion that killed Elliot Hensley. I took a dirty deal. Chemicals, illegal, and it cost lives. I'm leaving the company to Lila to fix my mistakes. The room fell silent, Dad's raspy confession hanging heavy. Margaret's face twisted, her glass slipping to shatter on the floor. Lies! She screamed, lunging toward me, but Henry stepped in her path, arms crossed. It's his voice, a man in the crowd muttered. Greg Tanner, our biggest client. I turned to Jake, nodding. He took the mic, his rough timbre cutting through. I'm Jake Ruiz. I survived that blast. Margaret knew about the shipment, pushed Thomas to take it for the cash. Then she paid to silence me. He hit play on the recorder, and her voice snarled through. Make sure no one talks, or I'll bury you too. Murmurs erupted, phones dropping as people gaped at Margaret. That's not true, she shrieked, clawing past Henry, but I held my ground. You blamed Dad, blamed me, but you're guilty too, I said, loud enough for every corner to hear. I've got proof. Henry handed out files, shipping logs, payoff receipts, Dad's medical reports proving his clarity. 3 years ago, Grayson Shipping killed 4 people, I continued, my voice rising. I didn't know. Dad hid it from me, but I spent the last year fixing it, a secret fund from my own salary for the victims' families. Margaret didn't care about them or Elliot. She wanted power. A woman near the front stood, tears streaming down her face. I'm Maria Torres. My husband died in that explosion. Lila sent us money anonymously, kept us afloat. The crowd shifted, whispers turning to nods. Margaret's eyes blazed, and she charged the stage, snatching the mic from Jake. I'll kill you myself, she hissed, her voice booming through the speakers before a security guard wrestled her back. The admission hung like smoke, undeniable. She tried, I said, lifting my sleeve to show the cut on my neck. Tonight, in the parking lot? Chaos broke out, shouts, applause, a few boos, but I wasn't done. I opened my violin case, pulling out the instrument Dad had bought me at 12. "This is for him," I said, raising the bow. The first notes of Vivaldi's Spring trembled through the hall, soft and mournful, then soared, a cry for the father I'd lost and the brother I'd never known. Tears rolled down my cheeks as I played, the crowd falling silent, some weeping with me. Maria Torres clutched her necklace. Greg Tanner bowed his head. Even Jake's scarred face softened, a flicker of peace in his eyes. When the last note faded, I lowered the violin, my hands shaking. "I'm not hiding anymore," I said into the mic. "Dad made mistakes, so did Margaret. I've kept Grayson Shipping alive, grew at 20%, saved jobs, because he trusted me too. You can hate me, but the truth's out. Judge me on that." I stepped off the stage, legs wobbly as Henry took over, projecting financials and victim fund records on the screen. "Lila's clean," he declared. "Margaret's the one with blood on her hands." Greg Tanner stood, his voice cutting through the din. "I owe you an apology, Lila. We all do." Others joined him, a slow clap building, not thunderous, but real. Margaret broke free of the guard, storming toward me, her face a mask of rage. "You ruined everything! Elliot deserved that company!" I faced her, calm now. "Elliot deserved better than you using his death to hurt people. Dad gave you a trust fund. You're set for life. This was never about need. It's about revenge." She froze, then grabbed a champagne bottle, raising it like a club. "You manipulative!" Before she could swing, 2 guards pinned her arms, dragging her toward the exit. "This isn't over," she yelled, her voice fading as the doors slammed shut. Henry put a hand on my shoulder, his smile tight. "It is for her. She just confessed to attempted murder on camera." I exhaled, the weight lifting, but not gone. The crowd milled around, some approaching with apologies, others flipping through Henry's files. Maria hugged me, whispering, "Thank you." I hugged her back, tears pricking again. Not from shame this time, but relief. Dad's legacy was tarnished, but I'd polished what I could. "What now?" Henry asked as the room settled. I glanced at my violin, then the faces watching me. Some still wary, some warm. "Now," I said, voice firm, "I lead, not just for Dad, but for them." The night wasn't over, but the war was, and I'd won. 6 months had passed since that rain-soaked night at the Emerald Crest Hotel, and Seattle's skyline felt different now, sharper, somehow, against the gray March sky of 2025. I stood on the deck of Grayson Shipping's newest dock, the wind tugging at my coat as I watched a freighter glide into Puget Sound. The company hadn't just survived. It had thrived. After Margaret's public meltdown, I'd laid everything bare. Dad's mistakes, her complicity, my quiet efforts to make amends. The truth cost us 2 clients, but gained us 5 more. Drawn by the honesty. Revenue was up 25%, and we'd hired 40 new workers, their families now tied to the legacy I'd fought to save. I'd changed too. The violin case still came with me everywhere, but the weight on my shoulders wasn't just guilt anymore. It was purpose. That night, playing Vivaldi amid the chaos had cracked something open in me. I wasn't just Thomas Grayson's daughter or Margaret's scapegoat. I was Lila, the woman who'd turned a broken inheritance into something whole. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a news alert. Margaret Hensley indicted for conspiracy, attempted murder. She'd vanished after the gala, last seen boarding a bus to Portland. Justice was slow, but it was coming. I didn't smile, just nodded and kept walking. The office was quieter these days, the hum of printers and ringing phones a steady pulse. I'd moved Dad's old desk to the corner, his photo framed beside it, him grinning at my first recital, bow tie crooked. A smaller frame held Elliot's picture, the one from the dock with "Forgive me" scrawled on the back. I'd found another in his file, a letter, tucked away in a locked drawer. Henry uncovered weeks after the gala. "Lila," it read in his jagged script, "don't let Mom ruin what's left. She's angry, but she's lost too. Tell her I'm sorry." I'd cried reading it, Elliot's voice reaching across years to soften the edges of my hate. Margaret wouldn't see it. She'd made her choice, but it changed how I saw him. That afternoon, I drove to a warehouse on the edge of town, its brick walls freshly painted with a sign, Thomas Grayson Foundation. Inside, kids laughed as volunteers unpacked violins and sheet music, part of a program I'd launched to bring arts to Seattle's underfunded schools. The other half funded families like Maria Torres, hit by the explosion Dad caused. I'd poured my first CEO bonus into it, a silent apology he couldn't make. A girl, maybe 10, tugged my sleeve. "You're the violin lady, right? Can you play?" I smiled, pulling my instrument out. The notes of Twinkle Twinkle filled the space, simple but bright, and the kids clapped, their joy a balm on wounds I hadn't known still bled. Later, at the Foundation's opening event, I stood on a makeshift stage, the warehouse packed with donors, employees, and survivors. Maria Torres approached, a shy boy at her side, Mateo, her son, orphaned by the blast. "Leela," she said, voice thick, "we've got no family left, but you gave us hope." I hugged her, whispering, "You gave me a reason to keep going." When I played Chopin's Nocturne that night, the melody wove through the crowd, soft and haunting. I saw Dad in my mind, his tired smile, his hand on mine, and felt him there, proud, maybe at peace. The next day, an email hit my inbox, Jake Ruiz, asking to meet. We sat at a diner near the pier, coffee steaming between us. "Found this in my old gear," he said, sliding a photo across. Him and Elliot grinning on the ship weeks before it blew. "He'd want you to have it." I traced Elliot's face, tears pricking. "I'm sorry I didn't know him better," I said. Jake shrugged, his scar catching the light. "You're doing right by him now." "That's enough." He paused, then added, "Heard you took in Mateo. Ballsy move." I nodded. Felt right. It's got a room full of music now. Mateo had moved in last month, a quiet kid with a knack for rhythm. I'd caught him tapping beats on the kitchen table, and we'd started drumming together, me on violin, him on pots. It wasn't a fix for what he'd lost, but it was a start. I'd stepped back from touring, but the music hadn't left me. It had just changed, a private thread tying me to Dad, to Elliot, to this new life I was building. Back at the dock that evening, I watched the sun dip below the horizon, painting the water gold. The foundation was growing. 3 more schools signed up, a scholarship in Elliot's name funded by Grayson Profits. Employees stopped by my office sometimes, thanking me for the jobs I'd saved, the transparency I'd brought. Greg Tanner doubled his contract last week, calling me the real deal. The boos from that gala night were a distant echo, replaced by a quiet respect I'd earned, not inherited. But the questions lingered, had I done enough? Exposing Dad's guilt saved my name, but stained his. Some called him a monster online, others a victim of Margaret's greed. I'd wrestled with it, late nights staring at his photo, wondering if silence would have been kinder. Then I'd see Mateo smile, hear Maria's gratitude, and know I'd chosen right. For them, if not for him. Legacies aren't just inherited, they're redeemed, rebuilt from the ashes of what came before. I pulled my violin out as the dock emptied, the air cool and still. Standing under a sky streaked with pink, I played Amazing Grace, the notes rising over the water. Rain began to fall, soft and steady, but I kept going, bow gliding through the drops. It was for Dad, for Elliot, for the lives we couldn't save, and the ones we still could. When I finished, I stood there, soaked and steady, and whispered, "You were right, Dad. I'm stronger than I thought." The horizon blurred through my tears, but it wasn't sadness. Just a quiet, hard-won peace.